And so how do we come into unity to allow God's glory to shine during this season?
Hey, how are you guys? It's so good to see you again. Last time we talked about, we mentioned that I was doing a course on hearing the heart of God. And we also talked about what is God saying for this season. And so we shared a little bit about thoughts on a time to build bridges versus not the time to build barriers, and about unity. And so I actually just did my Hearing the Heart of God course, and it was phenomenal. It was amazing. So if you missed it, we had 28 participants in 10 countries. So that was amazing. So if you missed it and you want to hear it, please feel free to email us. Email us at info@coilcoaching.com and just say I'm interested. They were all recorded and I had notes from it, and you can still participate for that course. So yeah, I'm excited. So today we want to expound on from what we talked about last time, but this time we want to talk a little bit about unity.
Right.
So, and Matt, why don't you share?
So as we were chatting last time, we were kind of letting Lindsay focus on what she felt like God was saying, what his heart is for this season. I chatted a little bit off of what she was saying, and then there was something specific, still related, but that I wanted to focus on in this aspect of what is God's heart, what is he saying in this season, and we were going off of this because it's so important as we're growing as individuals, learning how to hear God's heart for this season in your individual life, but then to have discernment for what's going on in the world around us. Because obviously right now, we're in a unique situation that the world is affected with the same exact thing, be it the COVID, vaccinations, having to wear masks, restrictions, all the governmental opinions and thoughts. So it's a very interesting time where the world's going through something at the same time. And so hearing what God's saying, because I feel like there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of division, and there's a lot of, I would say, offense that's a byproduct to that there's the opinions around what's going on in the world are so strong. On both sides, polarized on both sides, not many people in the middle per se, building bridges. And I always kind of look at it through the lens of eternity, what matters in eternity, and also kind of looking at I'm always curious, what would Jesus do if he was alive today in this situation? Because that's really the model of what we're trying to communicate as sons and daughters of God is to be like Christ.
And I even heard you say this multiple times, and I love this part, and it shows the heart of God whenever you would say, when there's a conflict or there's a divisive opinion. So sorry, my Filipino accent. You always ask the person, what does love look like in this situation? You're always very good at asking those thought-provoking questions, that challenge our way of thinking. It's not just about what I think matters, but hey, we're a part of the body here. They're supposed to be we're supposed to be working together. Our differences are supposed to unite us. What makes us different is amazing and unique, because our uniqueness is what brings us together.
Or separates us.
True.
But God's created our uniqueness to be a strength and to be an aspect of God and his glory and the kingdom. And so how do we come into unity to allow God's glory to shine during this season? And kind of what I'm going to talk about unity. I think it's the key word that we want to kind of come across today, and how we can actually walk in it as individuals, and then how we can pray into it and how we can, I guess, foster it in community. Because I'm not going to be affecting per se somebody in another country in their community unless they're watching this video, listening to this podcast, or they're coaching with us specifically. But then again, how is my influence affecting this space? Because that's what I have power over. I have power over myself, for one, and I have power to be able to influence those around me. And so how do we practically see and do the act of unity? And so
that's really good.
Last time you touched on connection. That connection is key.
Right.
Just like a bridge connects to two sides of land or two objects together. And so how are we creating connection in this time and season? And I was just meditating on connection. I just want to read a few thoughts here. One of the things I live by, and I kind of teach a lot around my coaching, is this concept around connection. And connection, it was first created obviously by God. God's connection with mankind through his connection with Adam and Eve.
Right. And
where there was the first disconnect in that space with mankind was when Adam and Eve decided to do it without God.
Oh, that's a good definition.
And in that created sin. And simply put, sin is separation from God. And the way I look at it is this: whenever man tries to insert his own opinion of truth, that is absent of God and God's love, it creates what I call a tearing. And I see it like the fabric of our heart in connection and relationship to God is knitted together. And when we move away from, to simplify it, love, there's a tearing that happens. And a lot of times it's pretty innocent.
Yeah.
Like even with Adam and Eve, I think in their state of deception, obviously we know the story goes into about the snake deceiving them, but it was about them being deceived into thinking, oh, can I gain power, or can I do this without God, out of my own power? Where the reality was, we were created to be empowered with God in connection. And so what does that look like for us today? As the body of Christ, to start with, as the body of Christ, there's so much division in the world. There's so much division in denominationalism, and now even more with the governmental aspects coming in and people's opinion about who, and at least this is America speaking, right? Who should we vote for? Who is God's anointed and chosen in this season? Which I'm all fine with that language, and I think there are aspects that are important to it. But I think that when we start putting man at such a high place, it's easy to get into this space of my opinion is truth above God. And when I know that I'm getting off track is when I know that love is absent from my opinion. When love or God is absent from my opinion, even in the smallest innocent way, then that is a form of disconnection. And I think for us practically moving forward, how do we walk as Christ? How do we walk as God walks in this season? And off of what you said, how do we build bridges and not barriers, right? Because how can I demonstrate God's love if I create a barrier to the person I'm supposed to be loving?
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I was even thinking about the topic of the division. Division is caused by offense. Technically, like when people are offended, everybody's been offended before.
Definitely, yeah.
And I think
we have offended.
and we have offended people.
Right.
But I think that offense is just one part of it. It's, I guess, like the lesson there is not the offense itself, but what you do with the offense.
That's right, yeah.
So I know you've put language into some of that, so I'm curious, like what do we do, like for someone like me, like if I have a different opinion than you and then I impose it and then there's offense going on and that disconnects us, like what would you say or model to a group of people that are in that spot, like, hey, I have a long-standing relationship with you, and yet this thing that I believe in and you believe in are not coming together. Like, what does that look like for us, to walk out that offense and stay connected and not disconnect, allowing the offense to disconnect us?
Yeah. Well, I think that disconnection happens when we lose sight of the simplicity of our connection as mankind, be it saved or unsaved, be it churched or unchurched, be it governmental or be it, a pastor or whatever, like all the things that could oppose each other. I think that our mindset around the acceptance of one another that happens based upon the value that God has set, in this sense, that God has set that each human being, saved or unsaved, is valuable, so valuable that it's valuable enough to die for.
Oh, that's amazing.
So I think the scripture I think of is, I can't remember the address, but you'll remember this phrase that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. And so this is that aspect where God could only perform the glory and the act of love based upon who he is, not based upon who we are in our sinful state, right? And so how are we like Christ in relationship to those around us? So obviously the most thing that's affected is our family, because they're the closest, that we have the most history together, friendships, those at work, those in the church, those are the easiest people to be offended with because they just should know better for some reason, right? Okay. And then it goes into how we view the government, how we view, corporations, all the things we could be offended with. We have to, we lose sight of that. And I think the word honor is the best word to describe this aspect of how I perform love, how I perform acceptance, connection, and unity. Am I honoring those around me? And honor, I love the simple phrase. I learned this from Danny Silk in his teachings, that honor isn't based upon who somebody else is or how they're treating me. Honor is based upon who I am and how I respond to the way people are treating me. And that is the beautiful picture of love. It's not easy. It takes work. It takes the renewing of our mind. But this is something I try to keep before me in my own walk it's not about how they treat me. It's about how I respond as a son. So, but I think what muddies the water is this: someone can be doing evil acts. They could just be doing the most heinous thing. You think you fill in the blank. Okay. There's a lot of spaces that's easy to fill in the blank nowadays, but there's a difference between who someone is as valuable to God, as a created being of God, and their opinion and their idea of truth. They're two different things. They're two different things. So when I look at someone that has betrayed me, which I've got my list of people that have done that, right? Am I looking at them, and especially the Christians who should know better, right? Am I looking at them? Am I offended with them, or am I offended, or am I hurt by what they did and needing to work through that pain and that hurt? And so so right now you could say, should I get the vaccine or should I not get the vaccine? Well, people get very intense about their opinion of if you should or if you should not. So this is not a talk about if you should or you should not. I just think it's a really good conversation to have to disagree about.
Right.
Because offense comes when we disagree. And the muddy water is we feel like they're potentially attacking us because we believe differently.
Right.
Or our thoughts of truth are different. Instead of focusing on connection over opinions. And I think married couples, we have the best, experience in this on how we're supposed to do life, how we're supposed to run the family, how we're supposed to raise our kids. Like, how do we fight for connection when potentially having very strong opposing opinions? Because that is the story. The story is it's more important to protect connection over protecting my opinion of truth.
Right. Yeah. Wow, that's a lot.
But my opinion of truth is a part of my convictions.
Yeah.
But if my convictions are not demonstrated through the lens of love, then it's difficult for us to have connection.
Wow.
And I think that's where the difficulty comes in.
Yeah.
So I think that acceptance without our opinions are so important.
Yeah.
It's important to have an opinion. It's important to process it, to talk about it.
Yeah.
But I think it's so key that we do it through the lens of love. How do we present it? How do we honor one another without taking it what I call personal?
Yeah. I really love that. We could talk about many other different things too. But I think it's important, we want to challenge you as, we wrap this up. I mean, we're going to do another segment, obviously, of this, because this is such an important topic, it's not just hey, let's not just brush everything under the rug, what happens to that, when you brush all the dirt under the rug. I think it's good to start conversations with people that you trust regarding issues, and not, instead of letting the offense disconnect you, allowing your differences to connect you. So, and I think that there's a lot of great ways to stay united, building bridges instead of barriers. And it's a huge topic, but we have to start with one brick at a time, we can't just woof, IKEA everything, right? No offense, IKEA, I love IKEA, but you know what I mean? It's not just hey, let's microwave it and put a Band-Aid on it. Hey, let's sit with the process and use the oven, and so there's a lot to talk about. And I do appreciate, my husband, obviously, being so intentional about many different things, in our past, this last couple of years in our season. And so, we invite you in that process as well, and obviously, if you don't know what to do and don't know what to start, you can always email us, we'd be happy to help you guys. So yeah.
Yeah. So just as we're kind of wrapping this time up, kind of some of the walkaways for today is I would put it in this simply said, value. For me to accept, let's say if we have opposing opinions, is to say, Lord, what does love look like? I mentioned this in last time. What does love look like towards them? But I also would say, how do I value them without having to agree with their opinion?
Wow, that's good.
What is my practical steps of love, of value? How do I communicate to you that you're valuable, Lindsay, even though we have very strong convictions that are opposing?
That's really good.
And sometimes it has to be something that's thought about. I normally once a week, I take around an hour, almost two, where I do something what I call my soul care. And it's where I really confront myself about these kind of issues. If Lindsay and I are having a struggle, to not look at the pain,
right,
to ignore the pain, is to feed disconnection, is to feed offense, and it's to to continue to create a wall. But when I lean into the pain of not knowing what to do, lean into the pain of, Lord, what does connection look like, and letting him speak to me and letting me come in agreement with his opinion, instead of, you know how it is, you just, when you're disagreeing, you have like, oh, how can I prove that I'm right? Or how can I show that I'm right? Instead of saying, okay, God, what is your opinion in this matter? And how do I move forward in connection? I think that would be key. How do I value you while being in the place of disagreement? And I would say this, it's okay to disagree. Yes. It doesn't feel comfortable, but it's okay. And as you pursue connection, that creates value for the relationship. Awesome.
Well, thank you, babe. Yes. That was amazing. Really great.
So so if you guys look forward to our next conversation around this topic. We'll probably do maybe one more, maybe two at the most. But I think it's a really important conversation to have. And if you are interested in doing our Kingdomized One program, you can check it out on our website. And so we'll be doing our next one this upcoming year. We start in September of every year. And so check that out. And if you want to learn more about specifically how to hear God's voice and hear his heart, hearing God's heart. Check out Lindsay's, or email us or check out on our website in our courses on Hearing God's Heart by Lindsay. Awesome. Thanks, babe.
Thank you.
All right. Until next time, bless you guys, and we look forward to seeing you again. Bye-bye.